A dark ritual is performed in a gloomy room. A magical circle is drawn and components are provided for the magic to take effect. The spell goes awry and a being is unexpectedly trapped in the wrong realm. Our hero seeks out an elusive red stone of immense magical power. For anybody who's seen The Sandman, all of this would sound very familiar. But one of our favourite anime series of all time shares the exact same synopsis. Before anyone starts calling them rip-offs though, it's important to note that dark rituals opening portals to another world and the power of the mythic Philosopher's Stone are common tropes in media because throughout history, people genuinely believe this. Just look at this real alchemical symbol for the Philosopher's Stone compared with the Deathly Hallows from Harry Potter. Alchemy was a real-world practice focused on transmutation. That is, a chemical process of converting one thing to another. It began as trying to convert base metals into gold, but expanded to speculative philosophy and the pursuit of universal cures and prolonged life. Of course, this was impossible, but alchemists still pursued one thing they believed could make the impossible possible: the Philosopher's Stone. This mythic red stone was believed to be the key to all that alchemy had left unachieved. To justify this belief, alchemists used the ancient concept of anima mundi, an intrinsic connection between all things. They also cited writings of Plato, which suggested the four classical elements, water, fire, air, and earth, were derived from a single common source called the prima materia, or first matter. This substance, or the Philosopher's Stone, were never discovered. As alchemy was eventually considered pseudoscience, it fell into the melting pot of esoteric beliefs that were outside the scope of science or religion, the occult. Neil Gaiman masterfully begins his story in the early 20th century. This was a time where scientific marvels were changing the world. Others wondered what else was yet to be discovered, and there was a renewed interest in the esoteric beliefs of occultism.
Have you come to join Father's Order? The Order of Ancient Mysteries.
Secret occultist orders like Golden Dawn believed that supernatural beings and alternate planes of existence were accessible through the use of various ancient symbols and practices, including pseudosciences like alchemy. As the notorious occultist Aleister Crowley explains, magic is getting into communication with individuals who exist on a higher plane than ours. Mysticism is the raising of oneself to their level. The Sandman's captor, Roderick Burgess, shares similarities with this real occultist figure from this time period. Born to a wealthy British family and gaining notoriety for his occultist pursuits. In this same time period, renowned psychologist Carl Jung became fixated on attempting to communicate with his own unconscious self. His work, The Red Book, is a record of his experiments, which are outlined in the book's prologue. From December 1913 onward, he carried on in the same procedure, deliberately evoking a fantasy in a waking state, and then entering into it as into a drama. These fantasies may be understood as a type of dramatized thinking in pictorial form. In retrospect, he recalled that his scientific question was to see what took place when he switched off consciousness. The example of dreams indicated the existence of background activity, and he wanted to give this a possibility of emerging. Neil Gaiman strategically uses the context of this time period to frame the narrative. It establishes that in The Sandman, the power of dreams is suddenly within humanity's reach. By discovering the rules and requirements of that power, it can be influenced and potentially even wielded. Not only the power of dreams, but a whole host of other metaphysical concepts, who in Neil Gaiman's story are anthropomorphic beings, able to be bartered and reasoned with, despite being bound by the rules and requirements of their core function. The time skip of The Sandman cleverly helps the audience to involve themselves in the fantasy. It implies that this frontier of knowledge had been locked away, just as The Sandman was, but is still discoverable in our present day. It prompts us to reevaluate our relationship with our own dreams, desires, and even our eventual death. Tonally, The Sandman explores such lofty themes through fantasy that is often light and whimsical, with sudden confronting and even horrific moments. There is a sense of unyielding intensity to its tone that mimics that of real life. Despite the fantasy elements, the characters are most often actually confronted by their own choices and motives. As the Sandman is forced to discover what is truly important beyond his selfish desires for control, we as an audience discover the same. The fantastical elements of The Sandman are in service to the characters and plot, quickly fading into the background in the tender character moments. When they're on full display though, they demonstrate the potential of what can be achieved in live action. As successful as Netflix's live-action adaptation of The Sandman has been, the road to adapting the beloved comic book series has been far from easy. Several attempts have been made with multiple heavy-hitting creatives attached. In the 1990s, there was a proposed feature film from Warner Brothers with Oscar winner Roger Avary at the helm, best known for co-writing Pulp Fiction. The project ultimately failed as Avary was let go for creative differences. The film remained in development hell for over a decade. In 2010, DC shifted their focus to adapt The Sandman for television, with Supernatural creator and showrunner Eric Kripke attached. Yet this project also failed to get off the ground and was shelved in 2011, with the studio instead deciding to focus on a TV adaptation loosely based on the character Lucifer from the Sandman universe. Interestingly, Eric Kripke went on to adapt another beloved and previously considered unfilmable comic book series, The Boys, for Amazon. Warner Brothers then announced in 2014 that they were planning on attempting another film adaptation, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt attached to star and direct. The first writer attached to this version of the project was Jack Thorne, but in 2015 it was announced that writer Eric Heisserer had been brought on to revise Thorne's original script. Soon after, Joseph Gordon-Levitt left the project citing a difference in creative direction, which was soon followed by the departure of Eric Heisserer, who believed The Sandman ultimately should be adapted for television. He stated, "I had many conversations with Neil on this, and I did a lot of work on the feature and came to the conclusion that the best version of this property exists as an HBO series or limited series, not as a feature film, not even as a trilogy. The structure of the feature film really doesn't mesh with this." And while the project never landed at HBO, he was correct in his assessment that it would be more successful in series format, and with the rise of prestige television, these high-budget, high-concept adaptations of long-form storytelling are more common. In 2019, when it was announced that Netflix would be adapting the series, with Alan Heinberg set to showrun along with Neil Gaiman as executive producer, it was met with a bit of skepticism. This is partially due to Netflix's hit-and-miss history of adapting 2D mediums as TV series, and yet they really pulled it off. The success of The Sandman gives us hope for more good quality, high-concept live-action adaptations, including some of the more ambitious source materials such as anime and manga. Even if you're not a huge anime fan, the brilliant world building and story of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood can't be understated. It employs a very similar narrative technique to The Sandman and delivers a comparable tonal resonance. First off though, let's break down what makes them similar. The two begin their narrative in the same historical period, the beginning of the 20th century. Where The Sandman has the dreaming, Fullmetal Alchemist has the truth. The Seven Endless are similar to the Seven Deadly Sins. Morpheus pours his essence into his ruby, which shares similarities with the Philosopher's Stone. The spell goes awry and a being is unexpectedly trapped in the wrong realm. Both have a fantasy setting that is whimsical and suddenly brutal, at times even horrific. All in service of a character story where the hero learns to accept the brutality of life, to stop trying to control it and let go, enabling them to care for those around them. The two works both began as comics, a graphic novel and a manga series respectively. It's worth noting that there are actually two different Fullmetal Alchemist anime adaptations. The first was made while the manga was unfinished, and as a result, the story direction they took when the source material ran out was not great. A bit of a Game of Thrones moment. So we'll be talking exclusively about the second anime adaptation, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood begins with two brothers who turn to the magic of alchemy to revive their dead mother. To their horror, the ritual begins to consume their own physical bodies. In desperation, Edward Elric draws an alchemical symbol in blood on a nearby suit of armour. This just barely saves his brother Alphonse from being fully consumed by the magic. With his soul now tethered to the armour, his entire physical body is lost, and Edward is left with one arm and one leg. After a time skip, many have mistaken the young and talented alchemist Edward for his younger brother, who is now a hulking, empty, animated suit of metal armour. The two brothers are conflated into a single legend, the Fullmetal Alchemist. The anime follows their journey as they seek out a substance that can restore their physical bodies, the mythical Philosopher's Stone. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood provides a rich and sprawling world with such great writing that no character feels like an afterthought. It's an action-packed adventure that isn't afraid to ask the big questions, punctuated with both light-hearted and tragic moments, similar to The Sandman. The incredible world-building, lofty themes, and rich character development of Fullmetal Alchemist is fundamentally rooted in its inspiration. What creator Hiromu Arakawa draws from the failure of alchemy in real history is a principle she calls equivalent exchange. As is explained in the anime's opening, if one wishes to obtain something, something of equal value must be given. This is the law of equivalent exchange. Not only does this explain how the magic system works in her world, this principle is something that every single character must come to terms with on a personal level. This means that even supporting characters and antagonists feel fully developed. We can understand their motives as we see them make these personal exchanges. And Edward Elric's personal journey is mirrored beautifully by the overarching conflict. The show expands on equivalent exchange as a moral and philosophical ideology as well, posing questions for both its characters and audience of our relationship with our governments and institutions, and even our own moral beliefs. Similar to the Endless in the Sandman, the 7 deadly sins are given anthropomorphic forms for the characters to directly interface with. Without spoiling anything further, far more direct moral questions are raised that give the show moments of deep resonance, forcing the audience to draw lines of what they think is morally acceptable in dire circumstances. The entire show is a lesson in hubris, just like Alchemy. From the heartbreaking opening to the satisfying conclusion, this idea of equivalent exchange teaches us that we must first give in order to receive. All this is told with the right mix of adventure, tragedy, and occasional comedy, paired with an amazing soundtrack, impressive fight scenes, and beautiful animation. Also inspired by the Industrial Revolution, Arakawa includes some steampunk elements in her already amazing world build. Edward Elric's missing limbs replaced with mechanical appendages called automail, which needs regular maintenance. This helps gently remind the audience of the goal of our heroes, as well as the peril of the magic world that they inhabit. Fullmetal Alchemist is one of those rare shows that manages to stick the landing. The show's finale and conclusion wraps up all the loose ends and feels like a genuine ending. No storyline or character arc feels incomplete, which, in a show that has such a large world build and expansive set of complex characters, is no easy feat. If you enjoyed The Sandman, we highly recommend checking out Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Not only do the two shows have a lot in common, it's simply one of the best anime series ever made and a personal favourite. The protagonist of Fullmetal Alchemist isn't quite as brooding as The Sandman, but if you're looking for an anime with some darker flair, you should check out Death Note, Death Parade, Ergo Proxy, or Darker Than Black. For more breakdowns and recommendations, please like and subscribe. If you want more Gateway to Anime, we're also on TikTok and Instagram. We're a very small team, so if you're able to support us, head on over to our Patreon. Every little bit helps. See you next time.